Welcome all into opening night, opening day of the college basketball season. I'm Zach Farmer. This is Thomas Dunn, and welcome into the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. Obviously, we're going to get into all of the games that obviously are happening on opening night, but also a number of the games that are happening throughout the course of the week. A lot of big games happening. We'll also be able to talk with Rocco Miller from the Bracketeer and also Field of 68, get his take on what we've seen early on. He's going to be coming to us from South Carolina, where he is at one of these early season events. So it'll be great to talk with him. And I know, like, just looking at all the posts last night on Sunday, the excitement is here. Tip-off has finally happened, and we already have a number of games going on as we speak.
You know, I can't wait till we get to the point of, man, it's only game one, but we're so back. It's so over within the span of 10 minutes of each other. So I'm ready for that. You know, we obviously mentioned Rocco coming on. Can't question the dedication that he has for this game. And I'm excited to go on. You know, you've got your St. Mary's, USF, Gonzaga, and obviously, you know, it's not in this camera angle. You do have your Wazoo gear that we have so been graciously given somewhere over there.
I got my pieces right behind me.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I got mine on right now, too. So shout out David Riley and co. up in the Palouse. So, you know, you can't hate on that. And, you know, I'm excited to see what these teams look like, because it's been a lot of hypotheticals for a lot of different teams, and even it carried us such into media day and through some of those exhibitions. Now we actually get to see it in play, see some resistance for some teams, and obviously some other games were like, you know, I don't know that we're really going to find out a whole hell of a lot, but we're going to find out at least some sort of, you know, how do they deal with adversity a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, a ton of games, especially even today on Monday, where we will see St. Mary's take on St. Thomas. That's a big one, like probably one of the lower key matchups throughout the course of this first week. We'll get into the details of that one in a little bit. We talked about mentioned Washington State. They were going to be having the Battle of the Palouse tonight against their cross-border rival Idaho. So that's always a fun one as well. I mean, again, like rolling down the list of just games that are happening tonight. We think about what Gonzaga getting started with Texas Southern. Obviously, not a huge, like a big deal, but hey, that's going to be interesting to kind of see what the Zag rotations are going to like now that Tyon Grant Foster is going to be on that roster and playing. We'll see what that all looks like. Oregon State getting a first crack, getting North Dakota State. I don't think that's going to be as much the pushover. And then also, as my camera decides to dip out on me, we're also talking a little bit about what we're going to see. We're also going to talk a little bit about what we see from our newest member, Seattle. They're taking on Denver. I'm going to have to fix my camera and probably just go to the backup one. And here we go, backup camera. Always have to have it at the ready. But there's a lot to get into on night one, and there's a lot to get to later on in the week, because there are some big matchups later on as well. But let's start with tonight. Let's start with who we have in these games of the week. And there's a few on the docket, a few we can get into. And what's the first one that pops on your list when you look at week one for the WCC?
So I'm glad that you used the week one moniker as opposed to just generally tonight. I think more than anything, I want to pay attention to the benchmarks down the road, because I'm not so sure that we're going to find out as much as we need to find out about certain teams. So I look later in the week more towards Friday. Wazoo going all the way across the country to take on Davidson. I think that'll be a compelling matchup. What does Santa Clara look like with kind of a bit of a hospital squad going on against McNeese State? That's also on Friday. Chattanooga has been a pretty good year-over-year mid-major team. They faced St. Mary's, and St. Mary's I was facing two pretty solid mid-major squads out of the gate in St. Thomas and Chattanooga. Pepperdine gets a big benchmark game against UCLA. We'll see what that kind of looks like. All of this is taking place on this upcoming Friday. In terms of tonight, I think I do kind of want to see the Battle of Palouse. I think it's just you get a little bit more rivalry talk. I think Idaho's going to want this game, and I kind of want to see how Washington State takes it. There's not necessarily going to be as much of an ease-in period, I think, as some people are forecasting, in terms of just that specific game and that specific type of context. And then The other two, obviously, St. Mary's, and we talked about that just now. And then Oregon State, can they not get bitten like Santa Clara did against North Dakota State? Surely I'm not remembering that. I don't have any PTSD at all whatsoever. But just kind of just see how all these teams kind of come together because you don't bring your best, and even if you don't bring your C game, you're going to get bit. And I think that's the one thing I really want to take away: who doesn't get bit.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. I mean, looking at the game tonight, St. Mary's and St. Thomas. I mean, there is a lot to be said about what St. Thomas was a year ago. This is year 5 at the Division One level. They are now NCAA tournament eligible. They were the runner-up last year in the Summit tournament to Omaha. They were the weird one where had they won, they would have just been sitting at home anyway. Uh, but this is a team that has won 20 games in back-to-back years. They have 42% of their minutes returning. This is a low-key, really good matchup for St. Mary's on night one. Obviously, like I think their Ken Palm number is at about 130, 4 right around there. But this team they're the Summit League favorite going into the year. Nolan Minnesali is the preseason player of the year. He averaged 12 last year. And this team has brought in a bunch of power conference transfers. Looking at Isaiah Johnson, uh, Arrigu, coming over from Miami. You look at Austin Hero. Yes, Tyler Hero's little brother is going to be on this squad, coming over from South Carolina. Luka Momcilovic, who is the little brother of Milan Momcilovic over at Iowa State. So there's some names to this St. Thomas squad that are going to be familiar. Maybe not the program as a whole are familiar to WCC audiences, but we're going to become very familiar with St. Thomas, the Tommies, but also this is only the first of 3 WCC teams they are going to see this year. They play Wazoo a little bit later, and also we'll see Portland on their non-conference schedule. And of course, they play in the same league as Denver right now, so there's another future WCC team they'll see in a couple times throughout the course of this year. So this game, I'm almost a little cautious about this for St. Mary's because based off the exhibitions of what we saw from Gales, I think it's going to get a little sloppy early. I think this is going to not look as a polished St. Mary's product as we're used to seeing. That now doesn't mean I think that they're not going to be able to pull away with this one at some point. They are still a favorite in this contest, but I think there's a lot still of question marks for St. Mary's, more so than I think for St. Thomas, less proven talent than St. Thomas has coming in. And the Gales, I think, have to really hit the ground running and not try to fall behind because we know that this is a squad that just does not do well when they have to play from behind.
I agree with a lot of what you just said. And I think the one thing, and we've posed this question how many times over now, is what does the point guard look like? How does the right combination come together? Because, you see one thing in training camp, you see another thing in these exhibitions against Arizona, Ole Miss. Is it Josh Dent? How much does Mikey Lewis take over? What does Tony Duckett look like? I kind of want to see how does the offense kind of function because it feels more athletic, and I think it will be more athletic, excuse me, than last year. But it's one thing to again do it in these quote unquote low stakes situations, and another to do it against what we see is a very respectable, very good, very rock solid mid major team in St. Thomas. And kind of like we mentioned, like or at least for my case, St. Mary's doesn't come to play, they will get bit. I trust Randy Bennett will have them ready. I do think that it'll look a little ugly, especially those first 10 minutes, and then I just kind of want to see how they read and react. I think that's more than anything what I want to see with what does Randy Bennett have in the toolbox to kind of tinker and kind of move around and kind of see where he can find the best version of the Scales team.
Yeah, and of course, we've been talking about it a little bit the last couple of weeks of just what's going to be that center rotation. Are we going to see Andrew McKeever be that starter right away? Is he going to be coming off the bench? How much? What's the minute distribution going to look like between him and Harry Wessels? How often are we going to see them in the game at the same time? And where does that kind of land Paulus Morauskas and his rotations and where he's going to jump in? This opening night matchup is going to be really fascinating to see as we go along. Some bigger ones later on in the week. I mean, I keep staring at Memphis USF because this was a game that got away from the Dons a year ago and probably a better version of Memphis last year than the version that they're going to see this year. And I think probably a better version of USF at least on paper, going into this year than we saw a year ago.
Yeah, and I think how many times have we said, man, we really want to pick USF in the top two, but they actually have to do it. But I do think USF, they may have a little bit more firepower than last year, which is crazy to say. And it's hard to, Memphis is one of the most confusing teams in the country. I think that's maybe a fair way to put it because you never really know what you're going to get. Are you going to get the Memphis team that's pretty gritty against a one seed, or are you going to get the Memphis team that loses at home to Arkansas State while getting blown out? And yes, the Arkansas State's a very good program. Let's not forget about that. But just in general, like what version of Memphis are you going to get? And that's really the one thing I kind of want to see. I think Chris Gerlison will have his team motivated. I think the returners will obviously know what they had slip away, and obviously Memphis moving on from a lot of older players, kind of see how that kind of takes shape, so to speak. And you mentioned that part of Saturday. How about Gonzaga taking on Oklahoma? I think that should be a compelling matchup. So lots of different little bit of matchups across the week, and I know some challenges here, some non-challenges there for some squads, but I think come the weekend, you're going to start to see a little bit more of a carve out in terms of what we like and what we don't like from some of these teams.
I mean, even looking down that road, you mentioned Santa Clara McNeese. Obviously, Denver, Seattle is going to be really fascinating to see on night one. Pacific Nevada. I don't think we can overlook that one. Now, this Nevada team is not nearly as good as last year's Nevada team or the year before. They were picked to finish 7th in the Mountain West. And this Pacific squad, we have been high on. We think there's a lot of potential for this team. Now, hitting the road, going to Reno and taking on the Wolfpack is no easy task. Going to be playing at elevation, going to be playing in a hostile environment. And now this Tiger team, I think, is capable of going up there and doing some damage. I think I really want to see what Elias Ralph is going to look like on night one. I'm really interested to see what some of the other pieces, how much of Casey Mbekwe do we get to see in this game? And as we talked with Coach Dave Smart, do we get the good version of him, or do we get kind of the version that we've seen in 2 past stops at Washington and Oregon State? That is going to be a good matchup, I think, there. Now, kind of rounding back, you talked about Oklahoma Gonzaga, because that matchup almost is kind of like the battle of 2 different styles of play, because this is going to be Gonzaga's bigs against Oklahoma's guards. These 2 teams are going to run at it in completely different ways. And I think if Gonzaga can save out of foul trouble, they can really start to take advantage of the fact that EK and Huff are arguably the best combination on the front court in the country. The longer they stay on the court, the better the Zags will be off. And the scheduling, it really feels like there's a ton to bite off the apple here in scheduling. And as we kind of talk about that, as we start to dive into that, let's get to Rocco Miller and talk to him about what we're going to see, not only this first week, but also maybe this first month on the conference slate. All right. You all know him, Rocco Miller from the Bracketeer and also Field of 68. Rocco, you're on the road constantly through the course of the off season, through the season. We're looking at this WCC first week. We're looking at the first month of the schedule, and there's a lot to really love about what these WCC teams have done. Obviously, you can point to Gonzaga and just the all year in, year out, just massive challenge that they present to themselves. But there are some low-key matchups in here that really feel like we have to pay attention to, because they could be really good barometers for what you could see throughout the course of the year. I mean, I was just mentioning Pacific Nevada feels like one that really could be, when we think about the Tigers, that could be one that kind of tells us a little bit more about who this team is.
Yeah, no doubt. I agree with you. And I think if you're a league like the WCC, every opportunity, especially for your real contenders, I think going into the year, like most of these years in the last 5 years in a row, it feels like Gonzaga and St. Mary's project to be tournament teams. As you may have saw, my preseason bracket went out this morning, both pretty safely in, almost in similar spots as where I had them projected at the end of last year. Gonzaga being a 6 and St. Mary's being a 7, but it means nothing now that the actual games are starting. It's just based on my analysis of all 31 leagues and kind of where they fall in that pecking order. And a lot of that's based on the schedule as well. So I'm glad we're talking about the schedule first. If you're a San Francisco or a Santa Clara, you're certainly trying to win, about 2/3, if not more, of your strategic games. So I think, right off the bat, that's critical for them to have a chance. And then I think, like you're saying, like the Pacifics of the world, even the Pepperdines and Portlands, the teams that are presumed to be near the bottom, if they can at least hold their weight in some of these Mountain West matchups, or even, if they happen to play an American team or an Atlantic 10 team or around on the same level and can beat some of the teams even from the middle of the pack, that raises the whole floor of the league. And that just means, when Gonzaga plays at Pacific, maybe it's a quad 2 perhaps, or a quad 3 at least, depending on how you want to look at that. So yeah, I think all of those games still matter, even though we know, Pacific and Pepperdine, for example, are not in the at-large realistic contenders.
Now, the one game we started talking about a bit was USF and Memphis this coming weekend.
Yep.
And that's a big one. And obviously these two teams played each other last year, and USF missed their shot. That was a game that was in their hands. I think they should have won that game, and they just let it slip away. Going back to it this year, it feels like this Memphis team is not, it doesn't feel like it's as good, or it doesn't match up as well with this USF team going into this year. Even them going on the road, and the Dons have done really well about scheduling a lot of their key games away for Moore Memorial. Kind of talk about a little bit about that game, because it feels like we're going to get a very early test and feel for how good USF can be.
Absolutely. I think they've got to be ready to go, because this is a real opportunity. Like you said, you look at Memphis's roster, there's not one player back from last year, which is kind of crazy, because Penny Hardaway's been there for plenty of years now, to where you would at least think a few guys could come back. Now, if you want to count your boy Ashton Hardaway as a boomerang, and maybe a little bit of a smarter basketball player after playing for Randy Bennett for 1 year. But outside of him, everybody's new. So obviously you still have a load of talent. Aaron Bradshaw's healthy. He's capable of just being an absolute monster and a matchup nightmare for guys like Diaz Graham and the folks in the paint for the Dons, Barry Wang, etc. But Bradshaw's also been prone for a lot of foul trouble. Duke McDaniel's going to take a ton of shots. You never know what you're going to get from Sincere Parker, because he also makes a lot of silly mistakes, and that gets him pulled out of the game, and sometimes he fouls too much. So I just think this Memphis team, as a lot of Memphis teams have just such a wide range of what you're going to see out of them. But I think in general, if you want to play them, especially with all new guys with not a whole lot of chemistry yet, you want to play them early. And we saw them in that. I don't know how much you guys saw of their exhibition, where they came out really strong. It was a game against Arkansas on their home court, the same court the Dons will play on. And then as soon as Arkansas really started clicking, Memphis had no adjustments. And again, I felt like both coaches, I'm still learning this exhibition thing, because we're finally getting matchups with really good teams against each other in certain cases. But it seemed to me like both Penny and Calipari coached that to win, like a real game with their rotation. So I'm going to take it for face value. And the Dons, of course, lost both of their exhibition games as well. One being a secret scrimmage, one being the public one at home to Utah State. So they're still trying to figure themselves out as well. But there still is a real opportunity. And that's, when you're trying to build a resume, that's all you can ask for.
With the public exhibitions, because obviously, like, for the fans, like, it's a great opportunity for everyone to actually see what these teams look like. But do you think like there's any level of coaches trying to maybe be a little more careful about what they're showing in that scenario? Because again, like, you don't want to reveal everything in a game that doesn't count. You're still trying to play with some things. What do you think there's been any level of like different coaching strategy that you've seen from those exhibitions that we may not have seen if those were secret scrimmages?
There's various strategies, but I don't think all of them pertain to winning like you would see in the regular season. I feel like there's a lot of experimentation, different lineup combinations that you might not otherwise try in a real game. Or maybe, you play a bunch of possessions through your third best or fourth best player instead of the guy you think is going to be your primary, because you've got a chance to see some real bullets. Like St. Bonaventure played earlier this morning. We're talking here on Monday afternoon. And they had the kid that transferred over from Division II North Georgia, like, had a great game today too. But in their exhibition game, they gave him 40% usage, which they would never do in a regular season game. So those are the types of things I'm looking at. Is how much of a look are they trying to get? And then if it is a quality matchup like Memphis versus Arkansas was, did they use the whole bench or did they only play 8 or 9 guys? Those types of things are kind of important, more than the final score. And then you're also looking for injury updates too, like any clues that so and so might be out for a while.
Interesting. What this morning, Woj getting tossed out the arena already.
Well, that ended up being a hoax. So,
Okay.
that was interesting for sure. Definitely took over the headlines, and we also, I don't know if you guys were listening to those broadcasts, but there was just the way the audio picked up on the Field of 68 microphones. You could just hear all the different visual fans were yelling. It was quite entertaining.
I could get behind some little backyard basketball with the fan base sometimes in the background. Sometimes can be for better. Other times you're getting some of the biggest tomfoolery in the country. But Rocco, you mentioned kind of the things that you kind of are looking at on the surface and some of the big things and big time matchups. I was curious, you go below the surface a little bit. What are some of the more underrated or underappreciated storylines that we should be looking for week 1 of WCC basketball?
Well, just right here tonight, we've got Seattle University making their WCC debut, and it's a little bit of a tricky game. Put a tweet about it out a little earlier, just because Denver is as a team not showing up in any of the algorithms because they hired I want to get his last name right, but Tim Bergstrader from Minnesota State Moorhead. And Minnesota State Moorhead last year, I think, got at least to the quarterfinals in Division II NCAAs and had 2 or 3 all-conference players, and Carson Johnson being their best player. So he makes the jump with Coach Bergstrader to Denver, and they bring 3 other starters. So 4 of the 5 projected Pioneer starters are all Division II players. So like your Bart Torviks, your Ken Palms don't have any information on them. So they're showing up as like the 330th best team. But if Cal Poly or Cal State Northridge or obviously Drake last year, there's a bunch of examples now. I feel like almost all these D2 guys in the last 3 years that have come up across the country, especially when they can bring their players with them like Denver is, there's a real shot for them to make a move in their own league. And that's a little bit of a scary matchup suddenly for Seattle versus when they scheduled it. Now, Seattle, I'm excited to see them too. Talking with Coach Chris Victor at Media Day, like you guys did, a lot of praise for Yun Sok Yo from Gonzaga, who was buried on the bench, but had a lot of exciting practices and scrimmages. I feel like I read about him on Gonzaga message boards for so long. Now we finally get to see him. They're going to run a lot of offense through him. And then we know Malik Arrington and Braden Maldonado, John Christophilus, they all played really significant roles last year in the WAC. So can this program make that next step? The analytics like them quite a bit. They had a weird record last year where they just lost a ton of close games. And then when they won, they would win by like 20 or more. So their Ken Palm was like up in the top 120, but had a losing record. So we'll see if they can convert some of those tough experiences into W's. So certainly looking forward to that. I think with both of St. Mary's games, I know I'm kind of going to the upper end of the conference by going to them. It's just pretty obvious that they're awesome tests against St. Thomas, my projected Summit League champion, and Chattanooga on Friday, my projected SoCon champion. So like St. Mary's does, they've got a bunch of these home games against some of the best in the one bid leagues. And it's super smart because there's really good odds that both St. Thomas and Chattanooga move on to have 20 to 25 or more wins this year. And so that will just continue to game the net, which is what St. Mary's has become professionals at in these last 5 years. So I'm excited for that. And even if we already know if St. Mary's slips up against one of them, they're going to be fine in the long run. It's Randy Bennett. I was encouraged, of course, as I'm sure you guys were, that they were able to get down to Ole Miss and get a W in a pretty serious exhibition game. Again, we can't take them for that much, but yeah, those are the ones that like just fly off the page outside of course, the San Francisco, Memphis. And then we get Gonzaga, Oklahoma later this week, which is an easy call for a needle mover.
Yeah. I mean, I think equally that all 3 of us bullish on Seattle U, and I think rightfully so. And I am intrigued to see kind of the matriculation effect eventually once I get towards league play. Cause I think Zach and I were kind of in tandem of, I'm not sure this is necessarily for how good they might be, the non-conference schedule that they should, be salivating over from the outside perspective. I am intrigued along some similar lines, and you kind of mentioned it a little bit in that answer. Is there any like Monday scaries that you have for any impending WCC matchups, or any storylines or like projections you want to see? See X or see Y, and if you don't see it, then you're like, I don't know after week one.
I mean, week one is so early. I
Right.
mean, even if like Seattle lost to Denver today and didn't play well for a week or whatever, right? Like, I'm not gonna judge the whole book by its cover, but of course we're gonna react to it, and we're gonna have, we're gonna have our concerns at minimum. I'm a marathon, not a sprint kind of thinker. And so I try not to judge any books by their cover unless there's some like information trickling in, like this is what happened behind the scenes, this is why we lost that game, or so and so's out for 3 months, but nobody knows that yet. Those types of things. Then I'm like legitimately concerned. I think for tonight, what do we got? Texas Southern at Gonzaga. That's just going to be a dress rehearsal for the Oklahoma game, I think.
Game.
But yeah, there you go. Thanks, Zach. You said it. And then who else am I missing? And that's the only D1 game, right? Besides
we got Battle of the Palouse. You never know.
I love that game. I do
Cougs
love
against the
game.
Vandals. I mean, you're familiar somewhat with the area.
We've also got North Dakota State and Oregon State. We got the Bisons and the Beavs.
That's right. Okay, I appreciate the reminder. Okay, so yeah, I do like both of those matchups, and they are both potentially dangerous. First on the North Dakota State Oregon State game, the Bisons, they've a lot of the coaches that scheduled them or did not schedule them said a lot of great things about their kind of their new core. They had 3 stars last year that all transferred up. Of course, Jackson Money being the big name. I think he's over at Virginia now. So, it'll be hard for them probably to go into Corvallis and win. That's a tough environment. Even if there's no fans, like it's still a tough trip, and Beavers play a lot better at home on average. And I'm curious about seeing what the Beavers have, like so many of their guys transferred out, and they ran really good offense last year. Though, like, let's not forget they had the 3rd best offense in the WCC. And I know the guy there that runs the offense and helps out, Chris Haslam. I think he'll do another great job. I think the Beavers are a little underrated potentially, but I kind of want to see how true that is. And then Washington State talked to David Riley quite a bit, not only at Media Day, but we've been texting the last week or so. He's got tons of confidence with this team, and I'm trying to figure out where that's coming from. I want to see it in action. But they're very, very excited about some of their early returns. Of course, they hosted New Mexico and won that exhibition game. Again, whatever that's worth. And then you have the Idaho Vandals are finally bringing back some capable players. They were a program kind of near the bottom of the Big Sky for years, and they built that new arena 3 years ago. Now Colton Mitchell's there, player I love. He's basically a Swiss Army knife for that offense. He can score when you need a bucket. He'll go and get you a rebound. He'll make the right pass, and he's a good defender. So I'm a huge Colton Mitchell fan, pretty good in supporting cast. So if the Cougars aren't careful, like Idaho could definitely pick them off.
Yeah, there's a lot. You have to be careful in these early games. Again, like we talked about, like week one, you're gonna hit some bumps in the road. Not everything's gonna go smooth quite yet. Still figuring things out. The one thing I was thinking about with Oregon State, and you know what? I think there might be at least a fairly good crowd going into Gill Coliseum, because I think the campus there is all done with football and they're ready to move on anyway.
Wow, low hanging fruit, man. Jeez.
Yeah, and it's a Monday night. It's starting to get cold up there. You might as well go inside for a few hours.
And same thing over Washington State, like that. What? Because that's the one that's Oregon State finally gets their only D1 win, and it happens to be Washington State.
Sicko, complete sicko.
I mean, they're bitter rivals. They're bitter rivals. You can't break up the Pac-2.
No, you cannot. Now one of the things that obviously happened over the last week, we touched on it, is that Denver is coming to join the WCC. We were talking a little bit about that possibility when we were at Media Day and what expansion might look like. And sure enough, within a couple of weeks, we get the announcement that Denver is joining. Stu Jackson talked about how that really was a kind of a 10-day turnaround, which just seems lightning fast to get all like the dots and I's dotted and T's crossed. we've talked, and you even posted a little bit about this, kind of opens the door for another possibility. You talk about St. Thomas as maybe the next one. I guess first your thoughts on Denver being the next one, and then the possibility of who could be number 12 whenever that announcement comes.
Well, with Denver, they've clearly struggled to build any kind of basketball success. It's been going on for almost 20 years now, it seems like, maybe even longer. And I just think there hasn't been a real commitment from the athletic department there to be great at men's basketball. You're also in the Summit League too. So when you're in the Summit League, the resources are what they are, and you're constantly going up against these Dakota teams that are loaded. Obviously, Oral Roberts has had some great years. And then last year, like the Omaha team pops out of nowhere and wins the league, goes on a crazy win streak. And now you have this St. Thomas team who's got more resources than even the Dakotas for men's basketball. And so when you look at realignment moves, you have to think about the entire athletic department, not just basketball. And I think in order for the WCC to invite Denver, it certainly wasn't based on any kind of basketball success recently. It's based on a commitment that they must have ensured Denver is ready to commit towards men's basketball, because that is the bread and butter of WCC being profitable or not, and generating revenue and staying at the level, or at least as close to the level as they can where they were, where they currently are for the future. So that it tells me that Denver made a substantial commitment for the future of their men's basketball program. I'm extremely excited, as I said, about their Division II to Division I hire this year. So I think that helps build some excitement. I'm assuming he'll win a bunch of games. They're not, probably their fans don't expect to win. They probably don't even know about him, honestly. So I think the other angle of it is I have some really good sources up in Minnesota. St. Thomas is kind of the silver spoon of realignment right now for this level. There's lots of interest from the Atlantic 10. There's people at St. Thomas that are crazy with their expectations. They want to be in the Big East already. I think the WCC, from what I was told, they like the WCC better than the Atlantic 10, just being able to come to all the West Coast cities instead of the variety of Midwest and East Coast trips that the Atlantic 10 requires. And so I think that's the big priority now for the WCC, even though, yes, it is a flight from Denver to St. Paul. It's going to be required that Denver has a travel partner. And I just don't see another obvious fit. Like Utah Valley would have been a kind of a no-brainer, but Utah Valley is going into the Big West unless they pull some sort of Grand Canyon move where they backpedal like a month later and come to the WCC. I think Utah Valley's off the board. There's nobody else in the state of Utah that would fit. There's nobody else in the Summit League that would fit. And and I don't think you could take Big Sky team or anything below Denver and St. Thomas, of course, for those who are not aware, are private schools. They're right in line from like an academic and religious standpoint with almost the rest of the WCC. So, that Denver St. Thomas combo makes a lot of sense. It'll be a tough road trip for it, but they'll also have to travel themselves out to the West.
I like that you mentioned the fact that there would have to have been a promise commitment, because obviously Denver, the last chunk of change, they've been bad. Like there's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And I think the one thing I also noticed within that is they're obviously very good at some non-basketball related sports, but they obviously can't be a driving force. Like men's soccer, they are really dang good at it. Obviously hockey, can I will into existence WCC hockey, because maybe we just may very well have to. But in general, I like the fact that they are capable in other sports, but I do agree, because from what you mentioned earlier about what Stu Jackson wants for this conference, what he's been consistent about in his messaging for this conference, and what Denver has not done to this point in knowing that they're making this transition, that they have to be better. Like they simply have to. And yes, they probably have made a good coaching hire. That's one thing. But now you actually have to win the games. Now you have to actually showcase that you're willing to upgrade your facilities, showcase that you're willing to potentially dip into the NIL market and kind of leverage your position in the mile high. That's what I want to see. What happens on the optics wise on the outside, because it's one thing to say, oh, yep, I'm going to do this. And then, we see the mountains of evidence that say, man, you have a long mountain to climb if you're actually going to do what you're saying you're going to do.
Yeah, no doubt. And I had a chance to do a brief little walk away from the stage with Stu Jackson one-on-one. And, one of the old adages is you don't increase your conference size just for the sake of increasing your conference size, you need to, if you're going to add more slices of the pie, you need to make each slice more valuable at the same time from what it was before. And so that just goes to show you. And he was right in lockstep with that rationale, as every conference commissioner exploring realignment should be. And I think it just goes to show that, yes, there's certainly some level of commitment here, or hopefully a very substantial one. It would have to be for University of Denver to be competitive in men's basketball for years to come.
All right, and of course, adding the Mile High City is not too bad of a travel location as well to add to the rest of the WCC
It is
slate
great.
of cities.
Yeah, it is great. It's in a beautiful area. If you guys haven't been out there, it's a little bit off the, away from downtown, but it's all, it fits right in with the WCC. It's kind of like off in its own area. Everything is absolutely tip top on campus there. Fits right in with the league. A lot of the campuses in the WCC.
All right. Well, though there's plenty of basketball to go. We are just getting going. Rocco, thanks for hopping on and chatting with us. We'll catch up down the road, and good luck, safe travels this week, wherever you're going to end up going. Where are you going later this week?
I'm still got to figure that out. I've got a few variables I'm dealing with right now, but luckily there's not a whole lot going on the next few nights. There's a decent chance I might pop in on Friday to see the Chattanooga St. Mary's game, so I'll keep you posted. If not, I might just take a little bit of time to try to watch as many teams as I can. And then in a week from now, I'm very excited. I'm going to be going down to a new event called the St. Pete Bash. We've got a MAC team, a Sun Belt team, Central Michigan, South Alabama, and Coppin State. Playing one game a day, but there's all standalone games at 11 a.m. Eastern. So breakfast for you guys, 8 a.m., and I'll be on the call for that. So really excited about that. So that we got to do a lot of preparation for that next weekend or this weekend, and that's coming up quick.
Oh, speaking of like on the call, do want to like throw out like that you and Thomas are going to be on the call together later on this season. So
that's right.
That is true. I will be putting my Canva novice ability to full use to do myself and Rocco side by side for some West Coast Conference hoops. We will reveal those matchups in due time.
Yes, we will. I can't wait. That's going to be a blast.
All right. Thanks a lot, Rocco, for hopping on. We'll definitely catch up down the road. Follow Rocco on social media. And then also, of course, like head over to bracketeer.org and check out all his content. Thanks a lot, Rocco, for hopping on. And yeah, we'll catch up.
Thanks, fellas. Always a pleasure. Thank you.
It was great to get some feedback from Rocco on just like everything that's been happening. Obviously, not only on the schedules, because we know that Santa Clara, the likes of Santa Clara, USF, St. Mary's have all done a really good job scheduling wise. Talked a little bit about the situation with Denver, St. Thomas. I mean, I really do hope that there is that commitment on the financial front for men's basketball, for women's basketball at Denver, because it does seem like there's a massive hill to climb for them to get competitive in WCC. I mean, it's a bigger hill than Pacific had to climb moving from the Big West coming to the WCC, a bigger hill to climb than UC San Diego is going to have when they join the WCC. It does feel like this is the first time we're seeing expansion with the WCC, realignment with the WCC, and a team that is this school has the most work to do than we've seen of anyone we've added.
Yeah, and I think the one thing I should add on to your statement where you say, I hope that there's a commitment. No, there has to be a commitment. I mean, there's no if, ands, or buts about it. When you haven't been good enough at all, and considering the way Denver has been in basketball over the last chunk of change, like there is no question about what they have to do. And that includes both on the surface, and that includes both in the win and loss column. I think more than anything, it's more of like I don't want to say like the gauntlet's has been thrown out at you, but it's something where it's like, okay, are you going to walk the carpet that's in front of you? Otherwise, you're not going to get anything that you want out of this. You're just going to get a bunch of B-leaguered opponents who are like, why are we playing this team? And then a bunch of people who from the outside who want to see this place succeed be like, well, why do we have you here in the first place? What did we really get you here for? And I think that's going to be some of the essential questions, like not of what can we promise, but what do we actually do?
Right. And I mean, we're going to see how much can change in 1 year at Denver. Obviously, we talked about new head coach. There should be at least some level of optimism. Rocco mentioned it, that the numbers really couldn't, like, none of the metrics could really like calculate what Denver was going to be going into this year, because a lot of the players were from the Division II level. So this isn't exact. There's no real data to pull from. So the 344, which is what their starting Ken Palm was, not a good look, not great. But it also may not be indicative exactly of who Denver will be going into this year. And hopefully that is the case. Hopefully we get to see at least a little bit of that with their game against Seattle tonight. Now, because they're not WCC yet, we do need Seattle to actually get that win and
Yep.
and help their own resume. But it would be good to see a really high quality game in that opening night. And of course, we're going to see some bumps in the road, whatever else, because it is night one. So everyone's still figuring it out. But that Seattle team, that Denver team, that's going to be a fun watch tonight. It's good. A multi-screen night tonight is going to be flipping through all these WCC games throughout the course of the week.
It's going to be an intoxicating feeling seeing all this college basketball on my screen, and at least in my case, I'm going to have to be really on it because I'm calling women's basketball tonight. So it's like, okay, we gotta figure this out, and much like the lower third that's now on the screen, who the hell are we going to be watching? Because there's so many different options, so many different things. Zach, is there anything that stands out to you right away?
I mean, for me, this first week, I think it's really about kind of two things. I think I'm looking at St. Mary's because I want to see the backcourt. I want to see what this version of St. Mary's basketball is going to look like without a senior point guard, without the one who is going to immediately step into that role. Randy Bennett did talk about that. Of course, point guard is a process. Augustus Marshallonis had to go through it. It wasn't until year 3 where he really figured it out. And Josh Dent is only in year 2. Can he step into that role? Who's going to be the one to back him up? How much is Mikey Lewis going to fill into that? How much does Tony Duckett fill into that? What are the rotations going to be in the backcourt? And then I'm looking over at USF because they get the big challenge right away. They get Memphis on the road, and I need to see if this front court, if the supporting cast is ready to go, because this USF team can't really wait too long to really take advantage of the opportunities that they have. They're going to have plenty early on, and they need to be able to, as Rocco pointed out, probably cash in on about 2/3 of those if they really hope to get an at-large bid. As they kind of go through the non-conference, they have Colorado. They could end up with Washington. They're going to have Loyola. They have St. Louis. They have Memphis, like Mississippi State. Like, this is a USF squad that has plenty of chances, and we just have not seen them get over the hump enough over the last few years to be able to get back to the dance. This week is going to be a big telling sign. I think we need to see some from the supporting cast. It doesn't need to be all of them, but we need to start to see that the group around Tyrone Riley and Ryan Beasley is going to be good enough or talented enough to be able to get them where they want to go this year.
Yeah, I'm in full agreement on what USF is going to potentially bring to the table, because I think we both know that we want to see some good things out of them. We both think we can see good things out of them. Now, will we see good things from them? And I think that's essentially one of the big essential questions. I've been really high on Vukasin Masic. What does it kind of look like with him in there? What does it look like with Diaz Grimm, David Fuchs? What does it kind of look like with him? There's so many different guys where it's like, man, if they just get a little bit of this, I like, there's can be a lot of bit of that. So for USF, I like that essential question. For me, when I look at everything else and kind of how we've prognosticated this league, is the mid pack as good as we say it is? And is it compact for the sake of the league being good, or is it compact because everybody's mid and beating each other? So that's the one thing I kind of really want to see. And I think the buck kind of, for me at least, it even starts with Santa Clara. Until they actually prove themselves within this specific season, they're in that pack until further notice. And they have a lot of injuries to start the season. So if they get by Cal Poly, Humboldt, okay, whatever. Then you get to McNeese, and obviously McNeese is not Will Wade McNeese anymore. But you can get got by that game pretty easily. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, where do we pick up the pieces from here? I'm going to Xavier. Who said that's going to be an easy game, facing Richard Pitino and company. So for me, it's what does the mid-pack actually look like is the one thing I want to see. How does Oregon State get out of the gate? How does Seattle U get out of the gate? And we obviously have differing opinions on what LMU may look like. How do they get out of the gate? Obviously, they don't have a challenge game 1, but just for the sake of argument and trying to delineate what this mid pack is, what does it actually end up looking like? Is it actually as good as we say it is? Or does it actually end up being the thorn in the side of a USF, St. Mary's, or Gonzaga down the road in terms of their resume?
I mean, there's always going to be the overreactions, and we're going to probably have some overreactions this week about
it's so over, dude. So over.
There's going to be one of these games, one of these teams. We're going to be like, it's over. Let's just end it. Season's over. Get us to March. Like, this is all done. But of course that won't be the case. Like, they'll be the games. Like, let's say Santa Clara, like, it looks like absolute garbage on Thursday when they take on McNeese, but then they go on the road and beat Xavier at Xavier by 10. It's like, oh, never mind. They're fine. It's like they just needed to shake off some of the rust.
It would be so Santa Clara if they did.
Well, you know what? At the very least, like, we're looking at a couple of teams that are probably, all three of those teams are probably in the same boat. Santa Clara, McNeese, and Xavier are all probably like right there, like, the same window of teams right now. So, but yeah, to lose the first one at home, but then to go on the road and then get that one, it's like, yeah, it tracks very Santa Clara. Just don't lose to the North Dakota State, and I think you guys will be fine. Like,
no promises whatsoever.
Like, of course, no promise, but we'll see. Like, hopefully, it's like, get by Cal State Humboldt first, Poly Humboldt.
Maybe if they're feeling it, and that, I think that question kind of, it extends to different teams. I think everybody's got their own kind of different path, and I think of it like a bunch of tree branches, kind of who kind of climbs up pretty quickly. We think Gonzaga is going to be pretty dang good, and they're going to have a good opportunity against a very pesky Oklahoma team. Obviously, Porter Mosier, no, what's the word I'm looking for? No walkover. They're not just going to sit and lay down. That's a very tough team that Gonzaga is going to have to face. And, St. Mary's, St. Thomas, they're not going to lay down whatsoever. USF, Memphis, not going to lay down. They may be inconsistent, but you'll know what you're kind of going to see in the first 10 minutes of kind of what the tone is from the Tigers. So, what does Pacific look like? Because Nevada, we've seen going up to Reno has ruined a lot of dreams. Like Santa Clara the other year, they lost by like 1 million points. Like, that was not great for their at-large resume before it eventually died. And then Washington State, on the other hand, conversely, they go up and beat Nevada. So what does Pacific look like? What does USD look like? We both have improved tones when it comes to the Toreros. Are they actually improving? So just a bunch of little nifty questions. And I think we're not going to get all the answers in week one. And I think that's totally fair. But I do want to see kind of what happens in terms of the road to finding those answers. What do the prognostications look like in that department?
All right. Well, enough of the prognostications. Basketball is finally here. We get to see some hoops tonight all week long. So be sure to follow along on social media. We'll be posting about, obviously, all the games tonight on all the platforms. So Thomas Dunn 24, post by Zach at unofficial WCC pod. Follow on social media. We'll be doing all that. Subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you listen. And we are ready to go. Basketball is finally here. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we will catch you later.